Welcome everyone to the webinar today. It's called Training Your Underdog and it's a part of the free webinar series as a part of Activating Your Bravery, which is brought to you by our 8-week online course called The Chase that gets going next week. We will definitely give a bunch of plugs for that, next at the end of this webinar. So we want to welcome you in. We want to give you all this information about this thing that I particularly have been working on for over the last 20 years that we brought into our life at Brave Enterprises here. Just do some logistics really quickly. If you've ever been on Zoom before, you can do a lot of stuff in the chat. We welcome your chat, your questions, your yes. I like what you're saying, Krista, or your questions. Just make sure if you want to present anything to the whole group that you toggle that little blue, little blue heading thing. It'll say panelists. Right now, if you contribute to the chat, it'll just be to panelists. Just click on that and give yourself the option to do all panelists and attendees. And if you want to send us anything privately that you don't want everybody in the webinar to see, you can just put in the Q&A. Any questions you have along the way, whether you want them to be public or private, we want to be able to address. If anybody out there knows me, I talk quickly. I have a lot of stuff to share today, and we'll get this all done in less than 30 minutes. But love your feedback. If you want me to pause, slow down, answer any questions. Otherwise, we want to get tons of information to you that you can use right away, especially in your own life or in the lives of any girls or boys or men or women that you work with. Because The Chase is an online course for women, we are talking specifically to women. So we're training your underdog, your meaning women out there. So here we go, training your underdog. So first I'm going to define what a top dog is. A top dog is someone who has the advantage. And let me just for a second indulge and back up while we have this top dog on here to tell you the story of how I even came up with this whole concept of the underdog mindset. The underdog is something we know about, right? We know that the underdog is somebody who is not popularly expected to win, somebody like Rocky Balboa or Malala. So I was coaching a club team for girls from non-traditional areas who wanted to play lacrosse in college. They wanted to blow past the obstacles. They want to defy the statistics. They want to go for scholarship money and recruiting spots in a highly competitive but concentrated sports at very few schools on the East Coast that offered programs at the time that I started this in the early 2000s. We tried to train them on getting better at lacrosse. We focused solely on lacrosse for so long, and what we realized was their lacrosse IQ was behind. Their skills and muscle memory in the sport were behind, and that was okay. They would eventually be able to catch up. But in order to get them to play and compete on the same fields as the best teams, we had to train their muscles like immediately. You're not going to get recruited to play at the best school if you're not playing against the best teams. At least that's what was true for us from about 2003 until I sold these companies and stopped doing it in 2016, right before we started Brave Enterprises. What we found is if we train girls to be tougher, if we train them to close down the space, if we train them to step up into the interception, if we train them to mitigate the opponent, the more skilled, higher IQ for lacrosse opponents' ability to use their skill against us, we could start to get the advantage. And our seasons were about 6 weeks long. We would get crushed in the beginning. And against those same teams 6 weeks later, the work we were doing on hustle and grit and deliberate practice and growth mindset and self-talk and confidence and bravery, these were the things that started making these scores be like 10-2 and 7-3 and around 5-4. We weren't going for the win. We were going for the internal respect and for our opponents to say that was the hardest I've ever had to work. We were training the underdog. Famously, in 2012, I met someone who said, you're doing like research-based practicing. You are activating science, what's out there and available in the research that we know provides short and long-term positive outcomes for kids. And I was like, what? It's not called hustle, it's called grit. And there's a woman named Angela Duckworth who came up with it. It's not called 10,000 hours and working outside of your comfort zone. No, it's called deliberate practice. And there's a man named Anders Ericsson who's literally studied all the experts in the world. So when I come to you now with a much more refined sense of the underdog mindset, the criteria for the underdog and the fuel to getting the underdog to move, it is based on 20 years worth of doing it observationally, anecdotally, with my own hands and my own creativity, just filling the need and solving the problem for our kids. But now it's laced with all the research and the science-based practices that we know today. It is an amalgamation of what we know. So the top dog is the person or the thing with the advantage. The underdog is not popularly expected to win. You can be an underdog in a relationship. You can be an underdog in a game. You can be an underdog at work. You can be an underdog in a subject in school. Whenever you feel like your back is against the wall and you don't know the path forward, that is being an underdog. And it is extremely helpful to find ways to be the underdog, even if you're the leader. As a player in college, I was the leader. I was the statistical leader. I was the powerful person on my team. I was the one who was going to be scoring goals. I was the vocal leader. I was one of the best in my sport at the time, but I was still the underdog in my head. And it's a biggest part of why I kept on pushing my game forward, even though I wasn't necessarily chasing somebody in front of me. I wasn't chasing after somebody's goals or after somebody's records. I was putting something so much different in front of me. So let's get to the criteria of the underdog. What we have found and now matched with existing research science and come up with our own of what makes an underdog. Number one is that you got to be chasing after something. That thing has to be ahead of you. You've got to determine what your top dog is, whether or not it really is represented by something that you're going to come in contact with, or whether it's something you put ahead of you because you are an underdog and therefore you are chasing. And it's not a flatline chase, people. It is a climb. You got to have claws ready to go. Work hard. Second criteria of the underdog. You have to at least know that if you're up against a top dog, if you're gonna get into that ring, get into that battle with somebody who is supposed to win, hard work is the bare minimum. It's the absolute bare minimum. 3 is you got to expect obstacles. There's a lot of goal-oriented science around this, goal-setting science around how important obstacles are to set at the outset of a goal. But the underdog knows there are obstacles ahead. The underdog is keeping their lateral movement fresh. They're keeping their muscles for agility ready and primed to fire. Because if you're not supposed to win, you're going to see stuff you've never seen before. And they are demanding risk of themselves, particularly in practice. They're demanding risk, particularly in practice, because they know absolutely that they're going to have to do things they've never been able to do before, or they've never had to do before, or they've never had to practice before. So let's break each one of these things down and make sure that you guys understand them sort of singularly, and a couple of tips that help people if you're helping people out there in the world try to apply this underdog mindset. The first thing is to chase. I said a little bit about each of these things, but again, chasing the thing you're going to chase really is a deep question, particularly if you're up against the wall, you don't know the pathway forward, maybe you don't even know the thing you're chasing after. Foundational to this is figuring out who you are. Who you are. I know this seems like a big philosophical, existential question, right? But you got to root this somewhere. You're not just kind of, I want to chase that thing. You're whoosh, looking at it I can barely see this thing that I'm chasing. I can barely see this thing that I'm chasing, but you still have to be able to see it. And figuring out what you want really is the second question. It's got to be anchored by who you are. Who are you? What do you want to make sure that thing you're chasing is something you really want. It has to have purpose. It has to have meaning. All of this stuff that relies on your transferring it and using it has to be anchored to your heartstrings. You have to want it for something that you value so much. When I think about the things that I'm going to chase, it has to mean the world to me, particularly because as the underdog, you're not supposed to win. You're not supposed to get it. You are in the fight of your life. And if you're trying to use this as a mindset to get somewhere, this is the first and most critical step, that you are putting out something, you are going after something that you want so badly, because you're going to have to defy the odds to get it. Second is you got to work hard, right? Any underdog who is like preparing for any minimal fight, if you're taking your chase seriously, if you really figured out who you are and what you want, then like, the work is ahead of you. It's going to be grueling. It might be dirty. You're going to have to roll up your sleeves. I'm just going to do that now, just for an example. The work is going to be hard. You're going to have to be working enough. And this is based on the concept of deliberate practice by Anders Ericsson. He had a book called Peak that I read. I just plowed through it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually what I applied in my life. But what if I knew this when I was in high school? What if I knew this when I was in college? That it takes 3 very specific things. Now, this is his work. It takes the 10,000 hours that you're working enough, that you're practicing enough, that you're putting enough time in, that you are working outside of your comfort zone, right? That you're being effective in your work, that you're working smart, and that you are identifying obstacles and mapping out your plan of action. But for us in this, we're applying the underbelly and the critical components of what Anders Ericsson is talking about. We will forward the book Peak when we do a follow-up from this call, that you are working smart, that you are being effective, that you are understanding the stuff that you're applying that's working, right? And you're troubleshooting the stuff that is not working. You're changing it. You're looking for different tactics. And finally, that you are working hard. What do I mean by hard? Not like hard, you're sweating and your muscles are fatigued. That you are working outside of your comfort zone. Right? That you are doing the hard stuff, right? That it doesn't feel easy in the work that you're doing, that you are applying your skill set beyond where it's ever been used before. 3, expect obstacles. You have to be able to expect obstacles. You have to name what they are, because there are going to be so many that you don't know, and you've got to be ready for those too. But you can do a ton of front end troubleshooting here. Now, what a lot of people think chasing after something relies on is resilience. And that is, I get back up. It's bouncing back, right? I'm going to get in the fight, punch down again. Get back up, punch down again. Get back up. I'm ready to play, punch down again. But a lot of what expectation of obstacles does to prepare you as the underdog is that you figure out how to be strategic once you re-enter. When you bounce back, boom, if I'm just waiting for this hit every time, like, I'm not working smart. I'm waiting for this hit. I know it's coming. Boom, I duck. This is me using strategy, not just stamina. So your resources are your strengths. Utilizing your strengths that you may have been applying somewhere else and unplugging them, or just replugging them or plugging them into where you can apply them now. When I was in college, the famous story is I was so good at lacrosse. I was a gritty athlete. I was a problem solver. Anything that was hard that was coming my way, I would break it down. I would build up my skill. I would take it into pieces. I would add it back up, and boom, I would solve the problem. And I didn't know how to do that as an academic person. I didn't know how to do that in my studies, in my schooling. And so I failed out of college with this humongous set of skills. I could have just unplugged it and put it over here. I could have found a purpose, right? I could have linked in these skills I already had somewhere in my brain with my passion for sports and found a way to apply them in school. That would have been utilizing the strengths I had outside of where I'd ever applied them before. We are not using the resources we have. We are so untapped, people. And for a different day, I'll tell you why fear is one of those most untapped resources, but we got skills that we're not plugging in somewhere else. Also, support. A lot of obstacle anticipation is about, like, who can help me here? Who can support me here? Can I ask for help? Can I be proactive here? This is definitely where I personally struggle. So I have to be thinking about the obstacles that lie ahead in the thing that I want to chase based on the hard work that I'm doing, right? What can I use that I already have? The underdog uses what she already has so uniquely that the top dog does not know what is coming. I cannot give myself chills any more than I am right now. Fourth category, you gotta want to demand risk of yourself. And I'm gonna be a little bit controversial here, but we have gotten so much feedback when we go out there and we run programs for adult women that women don't like the word risk. It's too hard of a word. Like maybe we just say it lighter, it'll be more easy and more palatable. No, 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 no. All right. We have to want to be outside of our comfort. We have to be seeking discomfort in practice so that when the hard thing is happening, so that as we chase up the hill, as we claw and battle, as we encounter a very tough opponent that is supposed to bring us down, we have already the skills and understanding and the support of knowing, the confidence, the belief in our ability and our experience that we can occupy space and success and movement outside of our comfort zone. Why am I shouting? Because I'm so pumped up that we can demand risk. And this is what it is. It's getting outside of your comfort zone when you don't have to. It's seeking practice outside of your comfort zone. It's wanting just the challenge of making things harder, of complicating your life when it doesn't need to be, so that you can practice it when it's going to be. And you can't plan for that. These are the controllables. When you have the time and room and space to be outside of your comfort zone, seek it. And when you want that, you are not only just having the underdog mindset, but you're working yourself into a brave mindset as well. Now, I can say, right, this is all good. Like, you got the qualities of an underdog. You're going in, you're finding your things. You're figuring out how you're going to do all these 4 things. First, who you are, what you want, that you're going to work hard, that you're going to expect obstacles. And yes, I'm going to demand risk of myself. But the thing that makes the underdog, like, it gives it fuel. It gives her fuel. It gives you fuel, right? Where you're going and you're filling up your tank is the internal talk that's happening. The internal talk that's happening. And we go really deep into this on the Chase, which is our 8-week online course, but we talk about there being different mindsets or different states that you can be in. And we're going to talk about that now, because self-talk is the underdog fuel. And we really dig into what each of these are for every individual person, because they're different. Where movement comes from, where fog comes from, where action comes from, where like absolute paralysis comes from, right? We talk about, and I won't go deeply into it today, but a fixed state or mindset is when you are just stuck. You are stuck, you are negative. It is a downer, Debbie Downer to the core. Neutral, where you're not necessarily positive, not necessarily negative, possibly just able to make good, sound, clear decisions, right? You are present. And then growth, you are moving, you are eager, you are excited, you are like positive, right? Some of these may be natural states for you by default, any of them. Some of them may be hard for you to stay in for a long time, any of them. And some of them may be where your underdog is fueled. So in game terms, we'll be talking a little bit about athletics today, and this is not how we always apply it, but you're thinking of your fixed negative talk mindset as your opponent, right? This is what your opponent is telling you. This is what your enemy is telling you, right? Things like, you know, this is yourself inside, right? I am not good enough, smart enough, fast enough, able enough, young enough, rich enough, skinny enough, pretty enough, whatever enough, right? I am not whatever enough. I will never get better at this. I will never get better at this. I don't even need to learn how to do this, right? It's too hard. It's too hard. It's too bad hard. It's too shaming hard. It's too suffocatingly hard. I don't know enough. I don't know enough. I don't know enough, and I can't know enough. These are the things we say to ourselves when we're in this fixed state, when we're in this fixed mindset, when we are our inner enemy. Now, when we're the referee, right? When we're neutral, when we're protected by the rules and the guidelines and the whistle, right? We're saying to ourselves, one step at a time. Maybe just try, right? Just a little try. Breathe, right? I want this. I know I want this, right? We're not in motion necessarily, right? But we're not stuck and we're not going backwards. And finally, there is the growth state mindset. The growth state mindset, the cheerleader, your inner ally that is pumping you, right? This is saying, you got this. I love figuring things out. Bring it on. Watch me. The underdog is doing a few things. The underdog is at times proving everybody wrong, right? Particularly the top dog. I am going to prove you wrong. You do not have this. But they're also doing something critical, and that is that they're proving themselves right. We miss this part. Girls miss this part. Women miss this part, right? We're out there so busy trying to prove everybody else wrong. We don't have an inner voice that's like, no, no, no. You're right in here. And that is the step that working on your growth state, even your neutral state, your inner cheerleader adds to the work of the underdog. We don't see ourselves as the underdog, or we see ourselves as the underdog, but we can't fight for her the same way we fight for Malala, the same way we want like every underdog team to win the game, to find their resources and be resilient, be strategic, work hard, expect obstacles, chase after what they want, get what they want because of all that hard work and strategy, right? So we have a tip for you to walk away today that could be really helpful, right? You can do all this stuff on your own. You could do all this stuff through the first person, but you could also use some really compelling science they're calling illism, where you do sort of distancing. You put yourself in the third person so that you can see yourself as somebody you're willing to root for. You see yourself as the underdog. And I'm going to show a quick video. It's going to do some funky things we're working on here of LeBron James. It's 30 seconds long. And people have studied this video. It didn't start this whole thing, but it definitely made it more public. He had to make a very tough decision to leave Cleveland, his hometown, in order to go to whatever his next team was. And you can see that he has just distanced himself in this decision. Let's watch it here.
I'm being told by producers that in Cleveland now, there were places where they were burning your jersey. I don't know if this comes in theirs. We've got some video of it right now. You surprised by this? Or just as you look, if you can see that image, how do you feel about it?
Well, I mean, I can't get involved in that. One thing that I didn't want to do is make an emotional decision. And I wanted to do what was best for LeBron James and what LeBron James is going to do to make him happy.
This is so incredible to me because you can see quite literally that he's distancing himself from I didn't want to make the decision. I want to do what's right for me. He's saying, I wanted to do what's right for LeBron James. And they say this leads to better decision-making and ultimately wisdom down the line. It allows you to be less hard on yourself because, as I tell this famous story of a friend of mine, she was running with her friend and she was bashing herself. She was like, I can't do this and I can't do that, whatever. And her friend who was running alongside her said, hey, stop talking about my friend like that. And she thought in her head, oh my gosh, I wouldn't be talking about another person like this. I'm only talking about myself like this because I build those pathways. So what I want you to try is to, instead of I want, or even who am I? It's who is she? Who is Krista? Krista wants, right? You can make that underdog, you as the underdog, her, she, Krista. And this could be helpful in putting that thing ahead of you, going and chasing after it, or putting that thing ahead of her and for her to go and chase after it. We have definitely talked a little bit and scratched the surface here about how to train your underdog. If you love this stuff, you really love this stuff, and you want to dig in, particularly because this kind of stuff is not like you're going to take it today in 30 minutes and I hope you use it. I hope you apply it. You got to apply it every day. You got to be looking to do it for the distance for this to really start to make a difference for you. But if you want to do it with us and you want to guide with us and go on this great journey of 8 weeks long, we hit this stuff on week number 2, and we keep it going for the next 7 weeks throughout the chase. We want to be able to offer you an awesome $100 off code today using Underdog when you go to www.morebrave.com, start chasing. I want to let you know that there are live sessions weekly, that there are skill building exercises, there are journal pages that you have every day of this 8-week journey. That there's on-demand content and instructional videos, and that there's an incredible community of people, and that you get a Brave guide to be your accountability partner the whole way through. There are tough and uncertain times right now for sure, people, and the only thing I can say that Brave offers just so much of what we do is because of our community, and that's what we want to be able to offer you here, and also to be able to move when things get scary. So we have appreciated your time today. This is where you can find more information about the chase and where you can use that Underdog code to get $100 off for this course, which starts next week in the intro week and then officially the week after. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. You can go ahead and email me afterwards. I'll send the code and the link to LeBron video and the link to Anders Ericsson book Peak in the follow-up email. Thank you and have a great day.